Good day, Tony Ballinger from the Fighting Men of Rhodesia YouTube series. My guest today is Debbie Davis from Las Vegas in the United States. Debbie was a WPO in the police force, and I'm really chuffed to have my first lady on board, and I appeal to any others watching this program today to please come forward and give their story. I don't know how many appeals I've made for ladies to come forward because they've also got their own stories to tell. So, Debbie, welcome to you. How are you feeling?
Good. How are you, Tony?
Good. Debbie's, for the audience, Debbie's in Las Vegas, and I'm in Mud Island, England, in Salisbury, Vamazonki. And what's the weather like there today? I bet it's hot, sunny, and really just typical, is it?
No, we're still in winter, so it's about 50, 55, but that's Fahrenheit.
Yes. What would
So
that
it's a
be?
little bit chilly, but not bad. We don't have really bad winters here.
No, I doubt you do there. And it's a nice city, I believe, Las Vegas, possibly one of the fastest growing in America.
It is. It actually was very nice when we first moved here 25 years ago. I think there was only about 1 million people.
Mm.
We're over 3.2 now.
Wow.
So there's not enough housing. We've got a homeless problem going on. So it's grown too big for me.
Mm, mm.
And
Well,
as you get older, we're just not doing the whole strip thing anymore. It's just chaotic down there.
crumbs, yeah. Yeah, it's always one of the places I'd like to get to, but we'll have to wait for things to get a little less chaotic, shall we say, hopefully. Um, right, Debbie, tell us where you were born and raised and how you ended up in the police force.
I was born in 60 in Salisbury, but my parents were farming out in Beatrice, which is about, I don't know, probably 3/4 of an hour from Salisbury, just past Salisbury South. Um, my mom and dad are originally from Bloemfontein, of all places. And that's why I have that weird name of Reitz, Reitz. But yeah, I was born, my two brothers are older than me. And my dad was doing really well, so well, in fact, that he used to play polo regularly. So he had polo ponies. He farmed tobacco, corn or maize, and then he had a dairy farm.
Mhm.
So I just remember him being up at 4 in the morning, to go down and milk the cows. And it was a great little farm. Uh, all of us had to go to boarding school. We were all in Beatrice boarding school. So boarding school at 5 years old was just, I don't know, it's traumatic. But it's the best thing that ever happened to me because it makes you very independent.
Mm.
Um, and then my folks, they were out there for about 10 years, I would say, on the farm, and they suffered 3 years of drought. And my dad just couldn't come back from that. So he actually joined the police force and was stationed in Beatrice. My mum used to work on the old telephone exchange, where you put the little wires in the phone
Yeah, yeah.
to connect people. Yeah.
Jeez. Uh,
Yeah. And then I did my junior school at Beatrice, very much into sports. I love sports, especially hockey. And then when I was about 12, my dad got a job out in Gatuma, which is Godoma now, running the reform school out there. And so we moved out there and didn't stay very long. I think we were there about 2, 3 years. And then he got promoted to another reform school in Mount Hampden, which was just outside of Salisbury.
so you must have known the Danielses in Gatuma. What was it? Yeah, Gatuma.
Royce and Patsy,
Yes,
Richard, Gail, Lorna, and Gavin. Gavin was my best friend when
yes.
I was in Gatuma. I mean, we used to go everywhere together. Lovely family, and we were always out at their farm.
I tried to make Gail my best friend, but I got rejected. Oh, pity, pity, pity.
He's a hottie.
Yeah. So what is the reform school? Is that for wayward children?
Yeah, so it was for yeah, not for adults, it was for kids.
Mm-hmm.
So the one in Gatuma was all black, and
Mm-hmm.
then he was transferred to the white kids reformatory school in Mount Hampden, which is about 20 miles outside of Salisbury on the Lamagundie Road.
Mm-hmm. So you closer to town at that point, and what happened after that?
I mean, I went to school at Maberang Girls High, uh, graduated 70, end of 78. And this is quite a funny story. Um, a, One of my cousins came down from South Africa, and he said to my dad, well, you know, Debbie's done her exams and stuff, so can I take her on a Flame Lily holiday? And that was Kariba, Wanky, and the Falls. And I was thrilled. It was the first time I'd ever been on an airplane. And just before we left, my dad said to me, you know, so do you know what you're going to be doing work-wise and stuff? And I said, no, I haven't really thought about it. So anyway, we went on this trip. It was amazing. When I got back, my dad said to me, by the way, on Monday, you need to report to police headquarters because you're enrolled in the police force. He said, you couldn't make your mind up, so I made it up for you. And I was pretty glad about that. You know, because I really didn't know what I was going to do. So the half end of December 78, I actually worked at head office and I was just doing basic things like filing. And then on the 1st of January 79, we had to report at Morris Depot for my training.
Morris Depot, yes, where I was for a while. Um, Take us through that basic training. What did you do? What did you learn?
Well, I tell you what, first week was hell. I don't think any of us anticipated what was coming our way. And even though I'd been in boarding school my whole life, you know, so I knew the basics, follow the rules. It was just these people shouting in your face. And it's quite funny. Some of the photos that I sent you, my husband said to me the other day, it only says Reitz. It doesn't say your first name. And I said, they never, ever called you by your first name.
No.
It was always, Reitz, get over here, you know, whatever. So all the photographs of all the cadets and whatever, they're all just last names. So, yeah, Hell Week. Oh, my God, we didn't know what hit us. We just got into our barracks, sorted out that they assigned you a room. The rooms were pretty cool. Just everybody had their own room, which was nice for the girls because I know I think in the men's side, it was kind of more like a barrack, you know, where they had multiple beds. So we were kind of spoiled. And we started with about 40 girls. And one of the great things about our intake, and actually all the intakes for 79, was the first time they ever integrated white and black to become police officers. So there was quite a big deal about that. You know, we were in the Outpost magazine as the first integrated people coming in, you know, for training.
Yeah, I saw the photographs, and which we'll be showing. And what did you sort of go through for discipline? Did they come in and check your beds and make you stand to attention and that type of thing?
I would say it was very similar to army training,
Hmm.
especially with the WPOs. You basically had to do everything the men did. There was a very big shortage of police officers, you know, particularly in the cities. So, yeah, the women had to be able to function just as well as the male police officers. So, you know, we had to do everything they did. I think the only thing we didn't get involved with in training was the coin training, which is where they would take these guys out for 2 or 3 days out into the bush, and they'd use live rounds. I don't know what they did. There was, you know, they had to read maps and do various things like that. So, but the discipline was hectic. There were a lot of girls that just couldn't handle it, you know. I think, if you've been like I said, if you've been at boarding school, you kind of, used to that kind of thing. Not the shouting, but basically there's rules and there's times and you better follow the times. So we used to be up by 4:30 in the morning, 5 o'clock. We had to be on the parade square in our gym kit to start PE. And the first day was a 10-mile run.
Mhm.
And you can imagine, I mean, I hadn't even run that far, even with all the sports I'd played. So we had a lot of girls that just weren't making it. And I was one of the bigger girls, quite tall. And so anybody that was falling behind, they would just say, you, and you, go back and pick them up. Everybody has to get back. And so, that put a lot of pressure on us. We got back. First thing you did was go and have breakfast, and that was very hurried. We had amazing food there, I must tell you. It was very good. And then straight back to your rooms, change into your drill outfits, which was basically a grey dress, stockings and dark shoes, and a hat. And then they started teaching us drill, and it was hilarious. It was really funny.
Mhm.
After that, we would go back and then get ready for whatever it was. We did training in law, so we'd have classes, musketry, medical aid, all of those things. Training was 6 months. And as we went along, we had a lot of dropouts, just people that couldn't manage it. One girl, her knee was buggered up, so she was always on what they call lizard parade. And you didn't want to go on lizard parade because the instructors would just berate you so badly. So that meant, they didn't have to do any kind of physical stuff.
With the range work, what was the largest weapon you handled? Was it purely handguns, pistols, or did you go on to FNs, etc.?
No, not FNs. The girls were trained on 9mm and Uzis.
Mm.
I know the males did FNs. I don't know if they went any higher than that. I don't think so.
Yeah, it's probably
But yeah, as a woman patrol officer, you only carried a 9mm. I never carried an Uzi, at all that I remember.
Yeah, I guess an FN's not the right weapon for a lady because it's
Not
heavy.
really, and you didn't have the space. It's not like the police vehicles that you've got now. They've got these nice brackets. You can put the
Mm.
shotguns up there, and we had strange vehicles where I was posted. So yeah, and also, I mean, we weren't allowed to carry a gun during the day unless there was a specific situation
Mm.
where the OC would say, "All right, take a 9mm out of the safe." So during the day, no weapons. At night, if you were on night shift, you had to have a weapon on you
And
at all
that's
times.
unusual, really, because you're now talking 1978 in the middle of a war. Things were going on in Salisbury. Was that round about the time Woolworths got blown up, or was that later?
Well, Words got blown up. I think it was during that 2 years that I was there.
Mm.
And I know that you remember the 5 bombs that went off simultaneously in the night.
Mm.
I was actually downtown then at a pub. I think it was Le Cocktail,
Hmm.
if I remember. And we just heard these massive explosions. We were within walking distance from the Monomatapa, that church right near that was blown up.
That's right.
So we went down there and helped some of the people. There were people. It was mostly Monomatapa wasn't damaged by the blast except for the glass that was falling down, and people were running out of that building, and this glass was falling down, so there were injuries from that.
Mm. So it does surprise me, really, and I'm sure people who are watching this from maybe the States we were more into guns, that we didn't carry, well, our ladies didn't carry weapons in daylight. And in fact, I don't ever remember seeing a male police officer with a handgun during the day. It's
No.
quite incredible, really.
For us, it was kind of weird because I was stationed at two small police stations, so Marlborough and Mayborough, and it was suburban plus farming area. So, you would go way out
Mm.
into the bush.
Uh,
But each report that came in, my boss would kind of like go, okay, there's a report, so take a weapon. But I actually can't remember taking a weapon during the day. I
mm.
just can't remember that.
And did you do riot training with shields and batons and that type of thing?
No, the only thing we did do was tear gas
Hmm.
training. So, we did, I don't know if you remember the rugby fields at Morris Depot where the rugby team used to come in and play.
Mm.
They would set off tear gas and we'd have to run through that. And then also in a building, and you had to go in and be in there for a certain amount of time. There were no masks or, eye cover or anything like that. It was so you could experience what tear gas can do to you.
Mm.
We did a lot of things. I mean, I remember one day going to class and they spoke about drugs. And drugs wasn't a big thing in Sim. It
Mm.
just really wasn't. The main drug there was marijuana. But our instructor lit this joint and handed it around to everybody to smoke it. I don't know why. Possibly, I guess, to feel the effects of it. But they were tricky because straight after that they put us on a run. So I didn't smoke it. I didn't inhale it. It was just to get that smell. And once you've smelt it, you can't. You'll always recognize that smell. It's very distinct.
It's like if you're looking for fake money, you actually study the real money and then you can tell the fake. And so
Yeah,
similar sort of process. Okay, so how long was that training for? 6 months?
6 months.
Right. And
Well,
then
actually, we started in January, passed out on the 31st of May. So it's actually 5 months.
and
And,
how many made
it
it
just
through?
kind of went up in increments.
Yeah.
We had to do exams on law. So you had to study. The book it was thick. And of course, you had to know what the laws were. And then our last, we had girls dropping out or they were let go or, whatever. And our very, very last uh, task for us was to go to an autopsy. And I just remember the guy, he was just so funny. The doctor that was doing it, he had a little chisel and hammer and all sorts of stuff. Um, and I remember him sort of peeling, he cut across the top of the head and then round the back. And he pulled this man's whole scalp down. And he said, "This is what you call pulling the wool over your eyes."
Oh, good Lord.
And that was, they forewarned us. They said, anybody that passes out or pukes, gets sick, it's instant dismissal.
Lord.
And we had a couple of girls that actually just because you have to get used to that sight of blood.
Mm.
Um, and so yeah, there were a few girls, I think two, that fell on the floor, and they were just like, you can't manage it. If you can't get through this,
Mm.
how are you going to be out in the field? So that was pretty crazy.
So 40 started, roughly how many got through the course in the end?
27,
Mm. Uh, quite,
27.
quite
And
a
most
time
of the
difference.
black girls made it. It was the white girls that just couldn't make it.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, that's interesting. But obviously they had strengths that we didn't have, and we had some they didn't have, maybe. But it's swings and roundabouts, isn't it?
Yeah. And
So what?
I mean, I'm trying to remember everything. Obviously we did driving courses. That was a lot of fun. They had, I can't even remember where it was, but they had this like an empty parking lot, I would say, or it had tar on it. And then they would put water on it and a bit of oil, and you had to go through this course, you know. And then they had a gravel road, and it went up this very steep hill, and you had to take an old Land Rover up there, and they'd make you do a stop halfway up. And if the Land Rover went back even by 2 inches, you failed. You know, and you know, of course, everything was stick shift and using your clutch and all of that stuff. So
Yeah,
it was fun.
stick shift is something the Americans and you understand. To us, it's gears. So, yeah,
Yes, yeah. I've lived here so long that I've had to kind of adopt their way
yeah,
of saying things.
yeah, you have to. My son and daughter became chameleons when they came to England. One day they went to school with Rhodesian accents, and a week later they were talking like bombs. Only
My
because
kids were the same.
only because they were sick and tired of people not understanding them, so they did pseudo bomb talk. But what about radio work? What radios did you guys use in the police? It was different from the army, I think.
I don't really know. Um, there was base radio at the station,
Hmm.
and we didn't actually have physical radios on us. So everything was done in the vehicle. So I couldn't even tell you about that, you know, what kind of make it was or anything. I just remember when I was transferred to my first station, you know, we had gone through all the call signs and, you know, all of that. But, you know, the first week they were calling out to you, you know, there's like a 375, you know, head to this, whatever. And you're just like going, oh my God, what is that? It was crazy. But you get used to it so very quickly.
So, what was your first posting, Debbie?
Marlborough. And I
Okay.
think it was because my folks lived out on they try to put the woman fairly close to where their families were. Unless you specifically requested, you know, a specific place, they would try and accommodate you. But most of us didn't know where we were going until we passed out. So there was a list up, and I was pretty happy I was going to Maybra. I never wanted to go to Salisbury Central. It's just, you know, not my cup of tea. I loved the fact that we had a bit of city and, you know, bush. To me,
Mm.
that was great.
So, talk us through your day-to-day routine in the police station.
So we had 3 shifts. It was 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., 2 p.m. to 10, 10 to 6. And they didn't really put me on a graveyard too often because it used to be quiet. You know, I was mostly doing day shift and night shift. So I was pretty glad about that. I was the only woman patrol officer there. At small stations, there would only be one woman patrol officer. So, you know, I had POs and constables and sergeants and SOs and stuff like that. And it was pretty great because I've always grown up with boys in my family, so I knew how to handle them. And I've got 3 sons myself, so
Oh.
and I'm really happy about that. I'm glad I didn't have a girl.
Uh, but, but I suppose they put females in the police stations because you had moments where really a female should only have interacted with a member of the public if it was something personal or maybe physical or something like that. Is that the principal reason, do you think?
No,
No?
no, I don't think that wasn't an issue at all. I mean, it's not like today where if you don't have a female frisking a female person, there's big problems with that. No, long ago, it really didn't matter,
Yeah. No,
you
no
know.
political correctness hadn't started yet.
No, mm-mm.
Oh, yeah. So what was your day-to-day activity?
Y- you know, like I had written in my synopsis to you, a lot of it was just really mundane stuff, you know, attending house thefts or uh, bumper bashes, disputes, you know, that kind of thing. We had quite a lot of domestics that we had to go out to, which is pretty sad.
Mm,
But I do understand it, you know, because everybody was under a lot of pressure back then.
mm,
So
mm,
especially at nighttime, and you know, people were drinking a lot, and you'd always have arguments with husband and wife and stuff like that. So a lot of stuff like that. But farms as well, it would be, cattle being stolen or problems, in the compound, stuff like that. I remember going to a lot of deaths out on the farms.
Mm.
And my first one, it touched me so much because they have a whole sequence of events that they go through. Um, and it takes a long time, so most of it was from older age. I mean, I remember some really old Medallas. I mean, they must have been over 100. I don't even know how they were still alive. Well, they weren't alive, but you know what I mean? I don't know how they lived that long.
Mm.
And they would have specific rituals that they did, but the noise, that's what I remember the most, the wailing, of the woman in particular. And there were certain ways that they had to be carried out. And I almost felt disrespectful because the only thing that we had to carry bodies in was the steel sort of coffin type thing.
Mm.
It had nothing in it. And it just seemed very cold because of the way that they respected their dead. They would shroud them in certain cloth and stuff like that, and they would carry them in a certain way. And then, we kind of just go and dump them in this cold steel box,
Mm.
which I thought was pretty cruel.
Mm.
Um,
Were they
so
collected? Were they collected from the police at some point for the actual burial in the tradition and culture?
we would take them to the morgue.
Hmm.
And then from there, I don't really know what would happen. I guess they would deal with that with the morgue.
Mm.
So, but also, apart from the autopsy, I just remember attending my first death, and that smell is something that you will never ever forget.
Yeah.
It's a smell that it's not a bad smell. It's
Mm.
not like, terrible, but it's just such a different smell that you when you smell it again, you know instantly that somebody has died.
Yeah.
But also, it doesn't happen as straight away. So I think a lot of these people on the farms, they actually wouldn't report the death for maybe 2 or 3 days. They would, have their ceremonies but they were very upset once they knew that the body was going to be taken away.
Mm. Did you go out into the farm areas at night, or was that to be at that stage?
Yeah, yeah, and that's when you definitely had to be armed,
Ah.
especially in these areas there were a lot of shebeens,
Hmm.
and you'd have to go out there because they are fighting or people getting injured and things like that. So yeah, and our vehicles were hilarious. So we had my boss, the OC, had a little Renault, uh, tiny little thing that he used to drive around in.
Is that the one with the
And then
gearbox? The gearbox, the
yes.
yeah, I called it a pop-up toaster in one of my talks because I went to war in one of those things. Can you believe it?
Oh really?
Yeah, but
Oh
anyway,
my God.
another story.
And then we would have buckies, little trucks.
Yeah.
Um, some of them would have a back, some of them would be open at the back. So you could only fit two people in the front. They also had the gear shift on the steering column.
And they were principally Land Rovers, grey, and maybe a Datsun 2 up front and a Bucky area at the back.
Yeah.
And that was it. And none of them were mine-proofed. I mean, that would have absolutely freaked me out.
No, but we did have, and I'm trying to figure out what the hell it was called, but it was an armored vehicle and it was a huge round vehicle. Like if you went round a corner too fast, it literally felt like the whole thing was going to topple over.
Yeah.
We had one of those at Marlborough, and then at Maberran, we had one that sort of had the zigzag
Oh, yes.
kind of thing. I seem to think that the round one was called a hippo,
I think you're right.
and the one with the zigzag was called
A zigzag.
a
Yeah.
cheap.
Yeah, but
No,
that's right.
not
Hippo,
a cheetah.
I think Hippo was the round one with the round sort of roll bars on it. You could
Yeah.
almost picture that if it did turn over, it would just keep rolling down the hill.
Yes. Yeah.
That was on a very small chassis for the size of that bit at the top, and they always look totally unstable.
It was so top heavy. It was
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
And literally when you went over bumps, the whole thing would roll back and forth. It was crazy side to side. But if we did go out into the farming area, if it was a farm that was just close off the road, we would go in the bucky. And a lot of, once you got used to your farms, you kind of knew which was bad roads and whatever. But most of the time you would go out in the hippo.
And that would be under a police escort, a male police escort. No,
No,
no, gee whiz.
no, I used to go on my own, or a few times I'd go with a constable.
Good Lord. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of, like I said, Tony, there was such a shortage of police
Mm,
officers, males.
mm,
Um, and yeah, a lot of times I'd be on shift on my own with a black sergeant and a couple of constables.
mm. Good
And
Lord.
then we had CID officers in the back. They had their own separate building, and my boss was in the main station, and you had a section officer who he'd only go out if was specifics. And an investigation department. So no, you were on your own. That's what I said. If a woman couldn't handle that training, you were gone because you needed to be able to handle things. And we were sent out to some pretty dangerous things.
Yeah, I was going to ask you for a couple of examples if they come to mind. They don't always when you put on a spot like this, but do you remember something that was quite
Well,
big?
I've got my list here,
No, go ahead.
so I need to have
Got
a
it on
quick
the
look
list.
through it. Can you believe this is all the paperwork I generated for this? Anyway, so our area, just to give you an example, was Borrowdale, Mount Pleasant, and Marlborough. Those were the three suburbs. And then our area out of that was out past Missouri Dam, and then all the way across to Lamagundry Road, which included the barracks, Grey Scouts barracks, and the agricultural college up there. So it was pretty far. It was about 30 miles.
Mm, mm,
Big area. And then also Missouri sort of going to the right of it. I can't remember where it cut off, but I would say Borrowdale, Mount Pleasant, sort of going out that way, and then there was another area
mm,
um, from another police station. Okay, I've got my most challenging incidents written down. So the most challenging incidents for me, and this is not anything that is grisly or anything like that, but
yeah.
was death notifications. And the police force handled all the death notifications for the Army, Air Force, whoever it was.
Mm,
And so if you were on morning shift, you used to come in at 6 o'clock and your boss would have death notifications lined up for you. You had to be there by 7 to try and catch the people before they left for work. And it was the most heart-wrenching thing to do, is to knock on people's doors to tell them that their son has been killed in action. And I can't remember the whole script, but we had a script that we had to read out. We regretfully announce that your son has been shot, and or whatever it was.
mm,
Um, and you just literally are ready to catch people because the first thing is just dropping to the ground. They're in so much shock. And you've got to spend a bit of time with them.
mm,
You don't know these people, but it's you can feel the pain. It just sears right through you. I
mm,
mean, these kids are 18. Some of them, they're so young, they just got out of school.
mm,
Um, so those were my worst. I actually hated doing those.
mm.
If I got a morning where I didn't have to go out and do that, I was really happy. We had a lot. We had sit reps coming in every day of, what was going on in the country. So that was really interesting for me as well to find out where the hot spots were and what was going on, and you get the death notifications and stuff like that.
Before you
Sorry.
move on from that, sorry, Debbie, I can sort of share what happened to me. I got injured and I ended up in Wanky Hospital, and they sent through a message to Salisbury, and they sent around a padre and some other guy, a captain or a elite, to go and tell my mum, not that I was seriously injured, but just, you're in a hospital, blah, blah, blah. And my mum was with my brother at the front door, and, it was like a door with panes of glass in it. And she saw the car come in the driveway, and then these guys get out. And my brother said, my mom, she just went limp, and she almost fell on the floor even before they'd even knocked on the door. So, in an abstract way, I lived through what you went through, but the reverse, if you know what I mean.
Right.
And terrible shock to my mom. And she cried with relief when she was told it's only an injury and not a death. But that must be the most dreadful thing for somebody to receive that news.
It was. I don't know why they would have sent a priest or a padre with
I
that.
think I think being army, it would be slightly different maybe from the police. I don't know. But,
Well, I know that they, if somebody actually died,
mm,
that would happen sometimes.
yeah.
I think it depended also on seniority or,
Mm,
like special circumstances or whatever. But I know that we gave a lot of death notifications. And once again, I just think there weren't enough people. They were all out in the bush.
mm, Sheesh.
So,
Mm,
yeah, I'm just reading here. The mortar attack on Marlborough. So, I don't remember the exact date, but I know I had only been at the station maybe 4 or 5 months, and they fired mortars from Christian Bank, which is right near Missouri Dam, and it's sort of a very flat top range of mountains. And they were trying to hit Marlborough Police Station, and they missed miserably. They all landed in a flay area, and I'd say thank God they didn't hit any, residences or even the police station itself. I
mm,
wasn't there at the time, but I did get called in because immediately um, they they called out Part 2, the CIG, whoever was available to go out to Christian Bank and hunt these guys down. And my boss was gone for almost a week, and most of the patrol officers were gone. So I basically had to run the police station for a week.
Good Lord.
It was crazy. Plus go out and do calls and, that type of thing. They never did get them. The army got involved and they used trackers, but these guys got out of there really quickly. So
So you were actually at the station when it got mortared. You were there,
I wasn't at the station, I was at home, but
right?
I didn't live far from the station. I did hear the bombs going off. You get so blasé about it when oh, it's another bomb. And then when my boss called me and said, you need to get into the station as soon as possible, um, we actually went out and saw. It was pretty close, but thank God they didn't hit anything. But
Mm,
they wanted to get them, in case they got better at the aim, I guess.
yeah.
You
Mm,
know. So yeah, I ran pretty much the office for a week while they were all gone, and they were very upset that they didn't catch any of them. And it was quite funny because my dad was in party at the time, so he got called out as well. So yeah, it
mm,
was kind of a whole sort of family thing.
mm.
Like my mom was a police reservist as well, so she used to come in and do the radio work.
Oh,
Not often, I'd say once or twice a month. And then, part two, my dad was called out. He'd be gone for like 6 weeks at a time. Or if there was, anything serious. And I remember the only time he was called into Marlborough police station was when they mortared.
Mm.
So that was pretty funny. I went through rural deaths, which really used to touch me. There was an incident the one day where these two little kids came in. They must have been like 10, 11 years old. And we had a quarry that was within our area. And they had been playing around at this quarry that day and found this bag, a black bag near the water's edge. And so they opened it, and inside was a baby.
Oh.
So we had to go out there and retrieve this. Thank goodness they didn't bring it with them. It was a black baby, had been in the water for quite a while. So when you first saw it, it was actually white, and that was something that happens when a body's been in the water for a while.
Mm.
So we weren't sure, who it was or what happened with it. But I remember, I had to sit the two kids down and talk to them about it and ask them if they were okay and kind of counsel them a little bit, because they were very shocked about finding something like that. So I would be too if I was a kid. If we got really bad, well, not even really bad cases like that, because I did attend a lot of deaths, but that one was a tricky one because, first of all, we didn't know if it was a black child or a white child. And it didn't really matter, but because of what it was, found in a bag, it was a murder, obviously, or it could have been a stillbirth, but it was too big. So it seemed to be probably, I'd say, between 6 months and a year old. So those kind of cases would be handed over to CID.
Mm.
And they would investigate it. CID would always investigate, like really bad murders and things like that.
Mm.
Suicides as well, we would hand that over to CID. And then the other one that happened in Marlborough that I do remember was getting a call early in the morning. I think it was around 7 o'clock from a lady, and she said she'd walked into the kitchen and found her husband unresponsive on the floor, and she believed he was dead. And, could we come and help her? Quite an elderly lady, I'd say in her 60s. So we went out there, myself and a constable. And it was kind of strange because I found him and there was like just an ordinary knife laying next to him. We moved him, and he was dead, by the way, by the time we got there. We moved him, couldn't find any marks on him or anything. So, I said to the lady, well, what's his normal morning routine? And, does he have heart problems and things like that? And she said, no, well, he would always come through in the morning and make a cup of coffee and some toast. And I don't know how I put two and two together, and I had a look at his hand that was near the knife, and it had a burn mark on it. So what this guy had done, obviously some toast or whatever had got stuck in the toaster, and he put a knife in there to try and get it out and shocked himself
Mm.
and died from that. So that was pretty crazy.
Yeah, I'm sure if he had a heart problem, that would have killed him, eh?
Yes. Yeah, and he was pretty old. I'd
Mm.
say he was about 65. His wife was about 60. So
Pretty old. Hang on, I'm 69.
yeah, no, and I'm 64. So
I mean, yeah, you're obviously thinking it's a young WPO that he was after.
yes. You know what it was like if you're over 40 back
Oh,
then.
gee. Well, once when I was on R&R, I wanted to go to the Camp Windsor Hotel because there were women there that were 30 plus, and they were a little bit easier to get hold of than the younger girls. And we called it grab a granny night. And they were only 30.
Yes. Yeah, I remember
Um,
those.
yeah. Anyway.
I remember those. The weekends were pretty fun actually, because there was a lot going on around town. All the bars were open and stuff like that. Anyway, we got a new recruit that had passed out. He'd only been there maybe 2 weeks. And I had a bunch of friends that were having a party at this house in Marlborough. And I told them about this new recruit. This guy would come so fully dressed to work, with the, I don't even remember what you call them, the sort of hard leather um, legging type things.
Mm.
Do you know what they're called? I can't
No, I
remember.
can't remember really. No, no.
Anyway, he'd come with that and his jodhpurs and, the whole thing. He was very smart. Um, anyway, so these friends of mine were having a party at this house and they had a pool. And it was like a Saturday afternoon. We were so quiet, nothing was going on. And so they called me and they said, come on over to the pool party and bring your new recruit with you. And I didn't really know what they were up to. But anyway, I went over there and with this guy and I told him, oh, we've got to go to this house because there's a problem there. And, you know, we drove over there and this poor guy, they were all sort of having fun with him, just whatever. And then the next thing they grabbed him and threw him in the pool, full with his uniform on. And I had friends, they were all mostly army. I never dated a policeman. I think the only time I did was when I was in Morris Depot, and that was short-lived. So I don't know why. I just wasn't very attracted to police officers. I used to think they were full of themselves. But anyway, so I met my future husband when I was at Marlborough, but I met him through his dad because his dad was a police reservist and used to come and do night shift there. Um, and I needed a place to stay. And he said to me, well, I've got a room in my townhouse and you're more than welcome to rent it. So I went to have a look at it and it looked great. And so I moved in there and him and I got on like a house on fire. And one of the reasons was because his sister was married to one of my dad's best friends, and they were both farming out in Beatrice. So I knew them very well. We used to hang out with them. My dad used to play polo with them. And, so it was like, oh, part of the family, So I moved in with him. And it was about, not even 6 weeks later, I was sleeping and the door opened and in walks this guy with all his army fatigues on. And he got a fright and he was like, who are you? And I'm like, well, who are you? And he said, well, you were in my room. This is my bedroom. And I was like, well, your dad rented it out to me. And that was Paul, who I am now married to. And that's how I met him.
Good Lord. Yeah. Well, that's a fascinating way to meet someone, isn't it?
Yeah. And he was in the Grey Scouts. And so I had quite a bit of dealings with the Grey Scouts because the training camp was within our area. And we had a few motor vehicle accidents and one involving one of their trucks, a horse cart. And so I met a few of them and started hanging out with them. And it was just so weird that Paul was also in the Grey Scouts, but he had been away on a 6 week stint, which turned into a couple of months. So his dad wasn't sure when he was coming back. And I don't know what he thought, but he was kind of like, well, yeah, use the room,
Well, I think if you'd been ugly, you might not have got that offer. But
Thank
it's
you.
it's fascinating the way we meet our spouses. And
Yeah.
going back to your police stuff, did you get involved in court cases as a witness or anything like that?
every once in a while, but really it didn't happen that often. So basically, all the small stuff, like motor vehicle accidents, whatever, unless there was a death involved or it was suspicious or, whatever, drunk driving. And, we didn't really stop a lot of those people. You know what the police were like back then. If you saw a young guy, parked on the side of the road with his car still running, I mean, we would just take them home, put them in bed,
Mm,
you know, park his car, put his car keys there and let him have some sleep,
yeah.
you know.
Letting off steam from the army
Yeah.
out, yeah.
It was only if there were injuries involved or whatever, a motor vehicle accident or something, we would have to take a report. So,
So obviously the places that let off the most steam were the nightclubs. Did you ever have to respond to any fist fights or anything like that? Not that you'd get
I was
physically involved, but
in some
maybe.
nightclubs when there were fit fights going on, but I wasn't on shift.
Mm,
The only one that was in our area was the Spaniards Hotel,
mm.
and that was pretty. There were quite a lot of fights there. They had go-go girls dancing, and yeah, it was a small club, not like Barney's or Squires or any of those places. Those were
Was
in
that on the
Salisbury
Lamagundi
Central.
road? Was that on the road to Kariba? That
Um,
no?
Spaniards was more in the suburb. I think it
Oh,
was
right.
in Marlborough suburb itself.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, and feathers. Yeah. Oh, interesting.
Feathers Hotel was in Maybelline.
Maybelline, that's right.
So
Yeah.
I had dealings with the Feathers when I was transferred to Maybelline.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and I used to hang out there all the time, on my off time. So I mean, look, back in those days, we used to go out so much.
Mm,
I mean, even I used to come back from the club at 4 in the morning and I'd have to start shift at 6.
mm.
And I don't know, we just had endless energy to do this stuff.
I think this is something our foreign viewers might not be aware of, but because we were such a small population, the stress and pressure on uh, I would say the white people. I'm not being discriminatory here because we were called up and often forced to go into the forces. The pressure was enormous. 6 weeks in, 6 weeks out, 6 weeks, and so people start to live a little bit more, you know, having fun as much as they could, and obviously fights would break out with wives and husbands, and because of the tension, so life was lived very, very hurriedly, like you're saying, trying to get as much fun as you could out of life before you met your maker or something like that. So
Yeah,
they were interesting times, and there are a lot of wonderful places to go out to in Salisbury. It's a wonderful little place.
I loved it there.
Mm,
I really did. I loved Gatuma as well, even though it was like really small. There was a lot to do,
mm,
and the people were fantastic, um, everywhere in Sim. I mean, just so friendly.
mm,
And I think because of the war, you had this feeling of people coming together. Everybody knew everybody, although you didn't really know them personally.
mm.
Um, and depending on where you went, like the Feathers, I knew that I could go there on my own and I was going to meet a whole lot of buddies that I knew, you know. So you didn't have to worry about, oh, well, I need to find a date or that
That
type of thing.
that was the amazing thing about the country. Whether you were male or female, you could walk up to anybody in a bar, in a restaurant, whatever, and just chat to them. You know, um,
Yeah.
there would be no sort of, if you did that here in England, they would look at you and perhaps turn their back on you. I mean, not everybody's like that, but it just seemed to be such an open and friendly society. My dad said the Second World War in England was much like that when nobody knew when they were going to die next from bombs, in particularly in London, and parties were wild and everybody was tactile, and so I think that war environment sort of engendered a lot of these easygoing relationships. We just needed to be friends with each other, really.
Absolutely. And we were so young.
Mm,
Um, and it's kind of crazy how it is crazy and I mean, it's the way our parents brought us up. There was a lot of discipline. Um, not bad discipline. I mean, you got walloped every now and then. And you know how it is. Your dad just had to look at you sideways and you knew, okay, don't do that anymore.
It was my mother.
But
My mother. My dad was soft as flipping melting butter, you know. He never touched us. He never raised his voice. But boy, when I saw that look, that little green demon in my mom's eyes, my brother and I would run like hell, I tell you. And she had a leather belt with brass buckles on it. And by the end of the evening, and a lot of people would be aghast at hearing these stories in this modern age. But, you know, by the end of the evening, we'd have a couple of diamond welts on our back, just one. And that was enough, you know, to remind, or on our bum, wherever she hit first. But yeah, it was my mom. I was terrified of her. And I think she destroyed every relationship I ever had with a girl because nobody was good enough for her son, you know.
oh,
But
really?
what a
Oh
mom,
no.
what a mom, you know, real Afrikaans stock. But yeah, fun.
So my dad, he was the authoritarian. My mum was very soft.
Yeah.
She she was just such a beautiful lady. Um, yeah, I was the loudmouth in the family, and so I think my mum was overwhelmed with me sometimes. But my dad, I can't even remember when I had my last hiding. I think I was maybe 8,
Mm,
you know, and I maybe had 3 in
yeah.
my entire lifetime, but it was just a known thing. And what I say to my kids today is that everybody grew up the same way. So you didn't feel like you were different or you were being treated differently. And we all wore the same uniforms at school. So there was no weirdness about, oh, what are you wearing? And,
Yeah.
that type of thing. I wish they would bring that to the schools today.
Oh,
It
absolutely.
would stop a lot of problems.
Mm, yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, people think that they would say, well, your dad was an abuser. I'm like, no, he wasn't. Not at all.
No, I mean, you know, for my mom, I might have overplayed her a little bit. She didn't whip us. It was, you know, right, you're going to get one, and that was one, and we would cry and rub our arm or our bum or whatever she hit first. And that was it. And like you say, we went to schools where there was discipline. I've still got a lot of discipline on my bum, I can remember. And I think that was something that made our country different. We were molded. We were whether you went to a boarding school in the rural areas or in the cities, we were molded. We were in a uniform mindset, and it produced such a lovely society. Generally, very law abiding and it was just such a lovely country to live in. I miss
And
it,
helpful.
and it's
Everybody was
helpful.
so willing to lend
Yeah,
a hand.
yeah, definitely,
If
definitely.
you broke down on the side of the road, like the first car would stop
Mm,
and they'd get out and they'd always have tools in the back and be like, here, let me fix it up for you. Just so great. I miss those days terribly.
yes, yes.
And everybody, and my kids are the same. I mean, you've met Dane. Um, we we always not made them. They were used to mixing with adults
Mm,
um, from Africa. And then when we came here, they just fit in. There were a lot of American people that I became friends with, and they were just like, your kids are just so amazing because they say hi to us and they want to talk to us. It's very divided here.
mm,
Kids do their thing and the parents do their thing, and they're very divided. And when my kids were smaller and they'd have friends coming over, they wouldn't even talk to you.
mm.
You'd open the door for them and they'd just walk straight past you into the house.
Jeez.
You know,
No,
I would stop them and say, hello,
no.
and who are you?
Mm.
And they'd look at me like I was nuts. And I'd go, I'm JB, I'm Dan's mum.
And so going back to the police stuff, is there anything else you want to tell us about what you did?
So I spent a year at Marlborough. Let me just grab my next page. So at the beginning of 1980, I was transferred to Maybrandt. I don't know why. I think they did that sort of on a rotating kind of thing to possibly the next intake was passing out. And Marlborough was quite a small station. When I went to Maberrain, the area was bigger and there was a lot more crime because it included the township, and I think it's called Khayelitsha. Does that ring a bell?
The name rings a bell, but I couldn't place it if I tried. But yeah,
Yeah, so Marlborough didn't have a township involved, and Maberrain did.
mm,
And so we had a lot of call outs there. Um, Fighting, drink, and most of it was from drinking. You know, they used to drink that kachas and just get totally blitzed, you
yeah,
know. A lot of deaths on the road from these guys getting knocked down because they would walk in the middle of the road. And, you know, we didn't have a lot of traffic lights out there. Traffic lights, street lights.
street lights, yeah.
Yeah. So it was hard to see these guys, you know, at night. So they would get knocked down and killed, you know. So
Mm,
that wasn't very good. Um, yeah, more serious crime, more motor accidents. The area included Lake Macawain, so we had a lot of boating incidents,
yeah.
drownings, you know, stuff like that. So it was very, very different to Marlborough, although um, once again it had farm area and then suburban. So it was pretty cool. Maberrain Police Station was in the Maberrain Shopping Centre. I don't know if you remember, it was like a little semicircle.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and it was right on the corner there.
Yeah, I remember that.
Uh, we had a lot more police vehicles, and it was just bigger, a lot more
I'm
constables.
surprised you went right down to Lake Mac. Wasn't that on the southwest side of the city? And Marlborough was like on the northwest, wasn't it? So,
Yeah, but this was under Maberrain's territory.
oh wow,
Yeah,
that's a huge area.
huge.
Mm,
Very big, very big.
mm,
And it started on the Lamagandi Road.
mm-hmm.
So, you know, I still had a lot of those sort of farmers that I knew out there, except it was just on the other side of the road. It included the reform school where my dad was the boss. Um, we didn't have a lot of incidents out there until after the elections. And I'll get to that. A lot of serious motor vehicle accidents. One of them that I remember very well was, I don't know if you remember the Warren Hills Road.
Mm-hmm.
It would come over this hill and there was a steep sort of drive down to get into town.
Yeah,
Um, and if you went straight, you would get into the town. I can't remember Salisbury that well, like where it was going to, but I remember it was Warren Hills. If
Jamison
you
Avenue.
turn to the left, it would take you past the Maberrain Drive-In
Yeah,
on that road, and I don't really remember what that road was called. But anyway, I was on a day shift the one day, and we got a call out to a serious motor vehicle accident on Warren Hills, and involved 2 deaths. So we had to pile the old steel body box on the back of the truck, and it was myself and a constable that went out there. When we got there, so there was a woman with her mother, and the woman's son was sitting directly behind her in the driver's seat. And she was coming from town and going to turn into that road going into Maberrain. And there was a motor vehicle coming down that hill from Warren Hills. Um,
mm,
and I don't know why, but she turned in front of this car and got T-boned. Um, both her and her son died instantly. The grandmother was sitting in the passenger seat and she had some injuries, so we had to get her to the hospital. But I remember we had to clear the road because it was around about 5 o'clock traffic. And, you know, so we were getting a lot of people coming home. And so we had to get a proper police report done. And I was directing traffic and stuff, but we had these bodies. Her son was about 7, and she was probably in her 40s, I would say. And we couldn't move them. So we had put kind of white sheets over them. and we were waiting for CID to come out because it was a death in a serious motor vehicle accident. But what had happened is I'm directing traffic, and this car pulled off to the side of the road, and this man started running across the street. And he was just screaming, "That's my wife's car. That's my wife's car." And I had to stop him. And he's like, "Yeah, who is that? What is going on here? Why have you got white sheets?" So, and he was screaming and panicking. And so I had to take him and sit him down in the police truck. And I had to tell him that his wife and his son had both passed away. I remember it was awful for this man to just be driving home from work and then to find out that his son had passed away and his wife. And then the mother was and his mother it was the mother-in-law for the woman. So his mother was transported to the hospital. So that was very traumatic. I
No, that
remember just sitting with him and
shame
trying to
there.
console him.
Now it strikes me that you were turning right. We drive on the right in Rhodesia, or we did still do. So if he was turning right across that traffic coming down the hill, you would have thought the old lady being closest to the car that hit them.
And I'm just thinking about it because I don't know now because we drive on the left here.
Mm.
So yeah, we would have been on the right. So the way I'm seeing it in my mind is that she had turned in front of that car.
Yeah, I mean, anything can happen from the impact of a car. There's no dispute in what you're saying. It's just strange how things happen that
Yeah.
someone closest to the actual car hitting them survives. And the little boy might have had his head badly banged as the impact happened, the shock across the car could have smacked him in the side of the head and done
Yeah,
it.
I don't know.
But tragic.
Anyway, I had to handle the guy, and CID came out and they removed the bodies and took them to the mortuary.
Geez.
But you got these specific cases. Like I said to you, there's so many things that you do. And that's one of the things I loved about my job was you would go in and you wouldn't know what was going to happen during that day. And it was never boring. So I really loved it. But there's specific things that I remember. And I remember when you said to me, do a synopsis, I was sitting there thinking, well, what did I do? And that was one of the incidents I really do remember. It sticks with me.
Mm-hmm. And initially, it was only you and a constable that went to that. Did you get any reinforcements?
Yeah, we called CID out.
Mm. Wow.
And, so because it was a major accident, you have to really get your report done properly. If we went to a minor accident, it's just like a little book and you kind of draw the figures, the cars and that just goes to your boss and he decides what to do with it. So that's why we had a section officer as well. It would go through him, and if there was anything serious, he would forward it through to the OC. And they would allocate, where the initial report would go, who it would go to, and what would be done. And then they would initiate court cases, etc. Yeah, I did have to testify a few times, but not that often.
Mm. So that brought you almost to the end of the war then. Is that when you left the police force?
Well, there were a few other things during that time. So April of 80 was when we had the elections. And obviously Robert Mugabe won the election. So that whole week, and probably for 2 or 3 weeks, was absolute chaos for the police because of the celebrations, but they were running amok, basically. So in Khayelitsha, I remember having to go out there with just 2 police vehicles with this huge throng of people coming down the street with knob kerries and pangas, and you've got myself, the section officer, and maybe two or three constables, and we've got I think my section officer had an Uzi with him, and I had a 9mm. And you've got to stop this crowd. They wanted to go into town, and cause problems.
Mm.
And it's quite frightening because, there were quite a few hundred of them, and they were just kind of like, oh, it's our country, and we just want to go and cause havoc now, and we're still trying to enforce the laws. So it was pretty difficult during that time. At the same time, we had to go and do the inauguration. I don't know what you called it back then. Must be about the same thing.
Yeah.
So I had to go and march, and while Prince Charles was there and past all the dignitaries and stuff. We had very little time to prepare. And so you had army units, police force, air force, they all had to come in, send their best in, and do this march past. And then I was also designated for protection of dignitaries. And I was protecting Joshua and Como.
Good Lord.
And, I mean, basically all you did was stand sort of at the end of the row, and you had all these dignitaries seated. So, we had Joshua and Como and Prince Charles and, God, I can't even remember all the names from back then.
Where was that? Where were they all seated
That was at the main stadium,
Oh, good Lord. I was there that night.
Salisbury Stadium.
I was attached to Mrs. Gandhi. I was there that night.
Really?
Yeah, you were there as well.
Yes.
Good Lord.
Yeah. And, we as soon as the elections were started, we were put on 12-hour shifts. So we were pretty tired. And during that time, you know, I'd been working 18 hours a day
Mm.
because there were so many things to do,
Mm.
and you were doing multiple tasks and stuff like that. So it was quite hilarious when were you there when they fired the tear gas into the stadium?
I think we arrived about 10 minutes after that, but of course, they wanted to all get in to see Bob Marley.
Exactly.
So they had to
Yeah.
fire tear gas, and Bob Marley got stung in the eyes and had to get off the stage. Yeah.
Well, Prince Charles had his white handkerchief and he was crying and he was wiping his eyes. So they shot some tear gas off during his speech.
Uh,
And I guess, he didn't want to stop speaking. So I just remember watching him and he's like wiping the tears away from his eyes. But then the crowd started pushing up against the fence line because they started the Bob Marley concert. And they fired tear gas into that crowd. And it was just the way the wind blew, it came right into the stands. And there was mass panic. I mean, Joshua and Coma was trying to like get out, and I was, trying to calm even like stay. Each person had a person, each of the dignitaries had a person that was supposed to guard them or be there to escort them or, And Joshua and Coma almost bailed me over because he was trying to get out there. I was just like, this is crazy. Absolute craziness.
I have a different timeline in my mind from that night. Did Charles speak before Bob Marley came on and before the
Yes.
so
And
that
they
must
had,
happen.
so there was a random thing of tear gas was shot. Nobody knew who shot it.
Mm.
And then that had caused a bit of problems with Prince Charles.
Hmm.
And then when Bob Marley started singing, that's when they shot quite a lot off because they were pushing the fences down.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, we arrived, Mrs. Gandhi and I arrived about, I'd say 15, 20 minutes after the tear gas. It was just settling down a little bit. And then I escorted her up to that dais where they all sat, and I had to sit behind her. But yeah, very interesting. I love that night when the jets flew over and there were a lot of people jumping off the stadium things, the chairs, because they were
Were
probably
they worried?
ex-tours thinking they were going to get bombed. Yeah,
Oh my God.
yeah.
I left probably halfway through Bob Marley, but he kept playing. I think he did really well. He kept playing, and they did push the fence down eventually, and they just let them in. They couldn't do anything about it.
Mm. I just said in my book, it was either the bit you write at the beginning or the bit at the end. I just had tears running down my eyes that night, with that flag going up and the other one coming down, and the green grass all lit up by the lights. And I was just so angry that night. I was fuming, absolutely bitter and twisted. But that
Well, we
happened.
were told different things were going to happen,
Yeah.
you know.
Mm.
So one of the things that happened during that time, they brought all the terrorists into those encampments.
Mm.
So where my dad was, um, at the boys' school, reform school, there was a big area there, football field and all of that. So they had set up these big white tents out there,
Mm.
and I would say there were about 400 or 500 of them housed there. And my dad, because it was a government department, there was nothing he could do about it. He just had to. But it did affect me because we got a call out one night that there were 2 deaths in a compound, and it was just off the Lamagundie Road. It was probably, oh, I would say 500 yards in, in the bush, just off the main road. Um, so once again, it was just myself and a constable went out there, pitch black, and we had to park on the Lamagundie Road. We couldn't get our vehicles down there and follow this pathway. And the first thing we had flashlights, torches. The first thing we came across was a guy lying just off the path, and he had been shot. He was dead. We checked him, and then we continued on. And just as you got into the village, there was another guy lying there, and his head had been bashed in with a brick, and the brick was lying next to him, and his head was totally caved in. And we were like, "Oh man, this is pretty serious." Okay, so we're just like two people there. Um, they were shouting, and it was like kind of chaotic, but it wasn't a big compound. It was quite a small compound. And anyway, I said to the constable, we need to get back to the vehicle and call CID Archer. And CID went out there, and we went back on the scene with them, so we had a bit of backup. They found out from the people in the compound that it was these guys in that encampment just up the road where my dad was, because they were coming into the compounds at night and raping women and stuff like that, and coming to their shebeen and all of this stuff. So they knew these guys, and they said, no, they're at the boys' school. We know them, and they've got guns. So one of the things about coming into those encampments, they were all supposed to be disarmed. They weren't
Mm.
allowed to have weapons.
Mm.
So now CID is busy on the scene there, and myself and the constable went to the camp, and we wanted to go try find the weapon that was used. Well, we got there. My dad, he met us, and they knew him quite well because he had been interacting with them. So, he said, all right, look, I'll go in there, and then I'll tell them that the police are here and they need to speak to you. So we went in there, and I tell you, these people were so riled up. They did not want to speak to us at all. We were sort of trying to see if there was anybody that was sweating and, maybe had run back, whatever. And, we were like trying to say to them, look, we know that there's weapons here, and you're not allowed to have weapons here. And they were telling us to F off. You don't control us anymore, and we don't have to listen to you. And it got quite out of hand, where I said to my dad, no, listen, we need to get out of here. Could turn into a serious situation.
Mm.
We never did find the weapon. Case was handed over to the CID, and I don't really know what happened after that. So
I can't believe how undermanned you were to go into that situation. I mean, lack of manpower, just frightening. I would never have done it.
it was, look, once we got in there, and I remember the guys at CID, they said, look, you need to suss it out. You know what to do if you feel like it's dangerous. Leave it. So I just wanted to talk to them. I said to them, there's been a serious incident down the road.
Mm.
We believe that it's somebody from this encampment, and you've got weapons, and we need those weapons. And they were like, get out of here. We're not talking to you.
Mm.
So that's when I first sort of started seeing the lawlessness, they're kind of like, it was like chalk and cheese, before then,
Mm.
everybody was very respectful, and, but yeah, those guys weren't playing around.
Mm. Mm.
So we got out of there. And I don't know what happened with the case.
Mm.
I was out at Lake Mac the one Sunday, and I wasn't even on duty. I was just out there with some friends of ours. And there was this big pontoon that I don't know how it tipped over, but it tipped over.
Mm.
And there were families
Mm.
on there with children, and some of the guys that had jumped off beforehand and whatever were diving down and trying to get to these people. So I went in to try and help, but before I did, I went down to the yacht club, and I called it in and said, there's a very serious accident here. There's people that have drowned. And so they sent the police divers out there. And I just remember I don't know how many bodies they pulled out of there, but it was a lot.
Mm.
Went all right through until probably 8 o'clock at night, just trying to get these bodies out. They were trapped underneath it.
I remember that incident so well. Kids trapped under there. Everybody,
Yes.
dreadful.
Yeah.
Mm.
And you just can't get to them, and that the time limit is 2 minutes, maybe
Mm.
2 or 3 minutes, and they're gone.
Mm.
So it was awful. That was the one. Um, the very last one, and this is one of my last things I ever attended with Marlborough. So there was a farmer that I knew quite well out there, because I'd been called out quite a few times with complaints from his workers, his farm workers, that he was very racist. He was smacking them around. And I had to go out there probably 2 or 3 times and calm people down and try and speak to this guy. He was a very Afrikaans man. I just said to him, look, that's not necessary to do that, and etc. So anyway, probably a month before I left, maybe even 2 weeks before I left, I got called out there by the farmer himself. And he said, my son has committed suicide. And I said, well, where is he? And he said, he's in the barn. And he told me the whole story on the phone. He said to me, I can't believe this. He's only 11. And I went, what? And he said, yeah, and we were going to go fishing this morning. He said, we packed the fishing kit up last night, and he was excited, and we were going to leave at 6 o'clock this morning to go out to the dam and go fishing. Said, but I couldn't find him in bed when I woke up this morning, and I looked everywhere for him. He said, eventually I went to the barn. I don't know why. I thought maybe he was in there. And he said, I found my son hanging in the barn.
Mm.
And I said to him, is he alive? And he said, no. So I went out there to do the initial report. Everything was, when I got there, I said to him, look, on the phone, I said to him, don't touch anything, leave it as it is. I couldn't believe an 11-year-old would hang himself.
Mm.
Okay. So when I got there, straight away, I was like, this is not right. The rafter was so high. For a kid to get a rope over there, it would have been a lot of effort. Okay. And the other thing was his legs were touching the ground. His legs were splayed open and his heels were touching the ground. And he was kind of like in a position like that,
Mm.
okay, with his legs down. And I was just like, this is not possible. So I called the CID out and met them on the road. And I said to them, you know what? I've had a lot of problems with this farmer getting called out because he's beating his laborers, his farm laborers and stuff like that. And I said, this is not right. An 11-year-old boy.
Mm.
And I don't know what happened with that case because I left, but I do believe that those laborers did that,
Mm. Mm.
or somebody that
Mm.
was just really pissed off with this guy, you know.
Well, was he distraught? It sounds like he was very calm and collected.
Absolutely no, he was very distraught.
Mm. How terrible.
I didn't discuss any of what I thought about it with
Mm.
him. You just don't do that. I mean, I'm pretty sure he would have known that it wasn't normal.
Mm. Good Lord. For him to think it's suicide's a bit crazy.
Yeah,
Almost, from my point of view, it sounds like a murder from
absolutely.
Trump's side.
Yeah. Yeah, I had found out that I was pregnant just after the elections. So I didn't tell my boss immediately. I didn't really know what to do. Uh, and I got pregnant by Paul, my current husband, or my only husband. And I just, had figured out, well, I'm going to continue in the police force. By then I was in my own house. I hadn't bought it. It was actually my folks' house. They'd bought it, but they were living out in Mount Hampden. And so I was renting it from them. Um, and I just thought, well, I'll be fine. I can stay on in the police force and look after my child and all of that stuff, get some maternity leave. Anyway, I had to tell my boss when I was about 3 or 4 months pregnant, my bump started showing. And he took me off the road immediately and put me into investigations. And I was only allowed to go out when there was absolutely like nobody available. And
Mm.
that's why I actually went out to that farm incident.
Mm.
But just after that, probably 2 weeks after that farm incident, uh, came into work one day and my boss said to me, you need to report to police office headquarters. The commandant wants to see you. And I was like, okay. Walked in there. Um, and the first thing he said to me is, WPO Reitz, are you getting married? And I said, no, I'm not. And he said, then I'm afraid we're dismissing you today. You're fired.
Wow.
And I was like, why? And he brought out this big folder with all the police force. Apparently I'd signed this. I don't remember when I left depot that you can only continue on in the force if you're a married woman.
Mm.
And I was 7.5 months pregnant then. So that was it. It was a big blow for me, you know. And what had happened between myself and my husband was really chaotic family situations. His family didn't think I was the right person for him. My family didn't think he was the right person for me. And there was this big bun fight. And it caused problems with the two of us. So we ended up splitting up. But I ended up giving the baby up for adoption. It was probably the worst day of my life. So, but later on, it ends with a good story. So, that's what happened. I left the police force and had my baby 2 months later. And then I went and became a sales rep. I was selling tires for Thermobond tires, driving a truck around. It
Lord,
was awesome.
and but she eventually made good with your now hubby, and eventually
Yes.
got married to him. Did you? Obviously,
Yes, I did.
yeah.
4 years later.
4 years later.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I moved to South Africa in 1980, end of 1981, beginning of 1982.
Hmm.
Um, I just couldn't see it working out there. So I moved there, and then he followed me about 2 weeks later, and we just about 8 months later we moved into a house together, and 2 years after that we got married.
2 years after that.
Hmm.
Wow. Hey, interesting. And then you've sent me a whole lot of video clips of your life in Namibia. We can discuss that very briefly and show a collage of some of the things that you did there. Um,
Yeah.
how did you end up in Namibia?
Well, we moved to Joburg, worked there for 5 years, and then from there, a friend of ours, well, lots of our friends were working out at Sun City. So we went and moved out there, got a job, absolutely loved it. And my husband went up in the ranks pretty quickly. But it got to, when was the election in South Africa? I think it was
92.
92.
92, yeah.
Yeah.
So he
It
was in
was
the
a,
army. He was in the army, was he? Your husband?
no, no,
Yeah.
no. He was working for Sun International.
Okay.
So we were getting moved around to different casinos he was managing and stuff like that. But you know that there was a lot of turmoil back then. I don't know when you moved to the UK, but South Africa, they had the AWB, and
Mm,
there was problems in Mabatu, and uh, people got shot.
yeah.
And even the casino we were running, my husband was running, was just outside of Rustenburg.
Mm,
And there was a gas station right near it. The gas station got burnt down, and they fired gunshots into the casino. And my husband was wearing a gun every day going to work. And we were just like, well, man, this is not cool. Um, but we got offered a job in Namibia to open a new casino out there in Windhoek. And we were like, why not? And we moved there. And I tell you, it was like a little mini Rhodesia. Not the landscape, except when you got into the game park at Tosha, that was beautiful. But the people were so friendly, and a mix of English, German, and Afrikaans. And obviously they'd been independent even before South Africa.
mm,
So everybody got on really well. It was amazing. I started in the casino there, and just quickly, I was in the marketing department, so I was doing a lot of their promotion work, which involved putting up shows, car giveaways, holidays, prizes, that kind of thing. And we were hiring people from South Africa to come through and do these shows because there wasn't really anybody in Namibia to do it. And so I saw a niche there, and I went and spoke to my boss the one day, and I said, would you mind if I left and I want to start my own business? And um, I got a partner involved, it was a dancer from Sun City, and she and I started working together, and we started building a dance group up, and we started training MCs. We had girls that would do presentations, like if there was an award show, you'd have these girls with big feathers and the whole thing going on. And so we started making pretty good money out of that. Mostly for the casino, but we also did jobs for Pepsi, Tafellager. A lot of places were hiring our girls. Um, we even were contracted to do the Marlborough girls. So what they would do is Friday nights was the night, and they would go and we'd blitz a bunch of bars, and these girls would come in their short little skirts, and they'd do the Macarena, and then go around and hand out free Marlboro cigarettes.
Oh,
So we did the Marlboro girls, and then Speed Stick. They hired us to do the launch of Speed Stick in Southern Africa, and they did it in Namibia. And they gave us a month to put together a dance number to go with this Speed Stick advert. So we did that. And then the casino asked me to go onto radio for them. And I got really popular. I was doing the drive time show Monday through Friday, and I was allowed to choose my own playlist, play my own music. Um, and then all I had to do was do some advertising with the casino. And because I was doing all the promotions for them, it was very easy for me
mm,
because, I knew everything that was going on. So I did that. A lot of things. I mean, it was so fantastic, and I loved it. Absolutely loved it. And yeah, if you show some of those clips, people can see what I used to do.
yes, certainly do that. And that was in Windhoek?
Windhoek, yeah.
Mm,
But we
yeah,
worked all around the country.
mm,
I mean, I remember Namibia was very popular for film crews to come in from America, and they'd love filming out in the desert and stuff like that. And I got calls, you know, we're doing our last shoot today and we want to have a party. Can you send a DJ out here? And it would be 400 miles in the middle of nowhere. But we had DJs and all sorts of stuff set up.
fantastic.
Um, it was amazing. And I got a thank you letter from a guy that's running his own lighting company now, and it's turned into a very big company for him. Because, back in those days, we didn't have stuff like that in Namibia. Um, and he had a couple of spotlights in the beginning, and I would say to me, "Hun, can you come out and do the show for us?" And as I was paying him, he was building up, adding more lights, and we worked really well together. And then a friend of mine, Tony, he had a full-time job, but he would do all our sound for us. Um, and we built this little kind of business together. They had their businesses, I had mine, and it grew.
Mm,
It just grew
amazing.
and grew and grew.
Mm, well done. And I think to end the show off, how did you end up leaving there for America?
So through my eldest brother, and I didn't even talk about them, but anyway, my eldest brother was in the Air Force in Rhodesia, and then he went on loan. He was flying Hunters, and he went on loan to the South African Air Force for about 2 years, flying the Mirages, based in Pretoria. And he was staying in a hotel there, and got into an elevator one day and met this girl in there, and she was American, and she was just there on a vacation, and she ended up staying with him, and then they got married about 2 years later, and
Nice.
he moved over to Houston, started flying Learjets, and then he became a captain with American Airlines, and he was flying with American for about 35 years.
Mm,
So he sponsored me and my other brother when I was 26. And I remember saying to him, "I'm never going to leave Africa.
yeah,
Like, I'm never going to America."
yeah.
And he said, "I'm just going to leave it in there because it's going to take some time." And thank God he did, because, by the time we left, we had kids. My eldest one was 11, and my youngest was 7, 6 or 7. And we just knew, that things just weren't going to go right.
Mm,
Um, Namibia is one of the hardest places to get a visa to live there.
mm,
We tried that, but you've got to be born there.
mm,
So we were on work permits. We had to renew our work permits every year. And we kind of were like, well, if this ever implodes here, we're going to have to go back to South Africa. And you know how South Africa has gone.
mm,
So 13 years after he applied, we got a package in the mail, and it was from the American Consulate General in Joburg, and they said, you need to come down for your interview.
Good Lord. You should
Yeah.
have just gone to Mexico and walked over the
I
border.
know. I know. It was a lot stricter back then.
Can't do that now. Hey?
Yeah.
Well, Debbie, it's been a lovely talk. I've really enjoyed it. I really have, and
Me too.
I'm sure our viewers will enjoy it as well. And I'd like to encourage other ladies to come forward with their talks. If you're a farmer's
Maybe
wife,
I can find some.
we'd love to interview farmers' wives because they went through very difficult times. Even the ladies that went to the old WVS canteens and served hamburgers to troops. We've all got stories, so
Yeah.
let's come forward. But I've loved your story. You've had quite a wild life, and yeah,
I've had an amazing life. Moving to Vegas, I had a lot of ambitions when I moved here, and I thought, well, I'm just gonna go into radio. But
yeah,
it wasn't like that. My husband got a job where he had to travel in the week, and I stayed with the kids. So I did work. I was a limo driver for many years, and I was a DJ for weddings and all that kind of stuff. And I had a problem with my neck, so I ended up with 2 neck surgeries. So I've been at home for quite a while, but it grows on you, you know. It took a while. I think for the first 3 years, I just wanted to pack up and go home.
mhm,
But no, we love it here.
mhm,
It's even though there's, with all the turmoil going on, it's all rubbish. Um, it's still very safe here,
mhm.
and it's the right move. We made the right move.
Definitely. If I was younger, I would make the same move as well with our Marxist leader here in England. Anyway, I'd like to thank you again, and I look forward to having a chat to you offline about that evening at Refare. I just want to clear a couple of things up just for my own
Okay,
thing. But thanks very much, Debbie. Thank you for coming on
you're
board.
welcome. Thanks for inviting me on your show.
And thanks for your producer behind this camera there, if he's still there.
Yes.
Okay. All right. God bless. Thanks very much. Bye.
Thanks, Tony. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
We welcome all our Tuteleni viewers to the Desert Jewel Casino at the Windhoek Country Club. Come with me on a tour of fun and excitement, and we'll show you why this casino definitely is your best bet in town. And there's never a month that the casino doesn't run a fantastic promotion. And right now, folks, here's our fantastic promotion. This is called Spring Madness, and they've really gone mad this time because they're giving away one of these fantastic golf decos every month for the next 3 months. To get into this promotion, it's really simple. All you have to do is come down to the casino, come right now, play on any slot machine. All you have to do is line up 3 promotional diamond stickers in a row, call one of the attendants, and they will give you a ticket into the draw. And we're just busy throwing our tickets into the draw tonight for our Spring Madness draw. Sharika's giving the barrel a bit of a spin. We're going to be drawing our first lucky ticket for the night.